Today on the Strong Women Podcast, we have Jaelene Hinkle, now Daniels, with us, and I'm looking forward to hearing her whole story and sharing it with you all. Jaelene has played professional soccer since 2015. Now, she's played soccer for longer than that, but professionally, she started her career in 2015 and just recently retired in November of 2020. She played for the North Carolina Courage. The best way to describe Jaelene is actually reading a quote by one of her coaches. So I'm going to read just bits and pieces of it to kind of give you an idea of what a rock star she is. Jaelene is unquestionably the best left back in the world. That's what her coach says. The complete modern fullback. Tremendous engine, speed, delivery, brilliant going forward, and tough to beat one-on-one. It's amazing to see her growth and development into a fabulous player. And then I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. And he ends the quote ends with him saying, "She is a courageous, strong, and brave woman that I'm privileged to have coached. You can't replace Jay, but you can look back and know that she had a marvelous, successful career." What words of encouragement! And wow, that's just amazing to have a coach actually say that about you. So, all that to say, thank you for coming on, Jaelene.
Yeah, I'm super excited.
Okay, Jaelene, you are young, but we like to always start with our guests at the beginning of their lives. You won't have as many years to talk about as some of our guests.
She's young, but she's retired already. So.
She's young, but she's a retired woman, which is so strange because you're younger than me and you're retired. No, that's the difference of being a professional sports player, right? Is you can't be in sports professionally your whole life until you're in your 70s when normal people retire.
Right, exactly.
Okay, but we love to always hear about, your background. And so tell us a little bit about your family, where you grew up and the family you grew up in, the home, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Denver, Colorado, and that's where I'm at now. After retirement, me and my husband moved back here, and majority of my family is still here. So it's been really sweet to be back and to be at family gatherings and all of that stuff. So I was actually homeschooled from 1st grade to 8th grade, and I went to Valor Christian High School for 9th through 12th grade, and that was kind of a big transition for me growing up. Yeah, well, now it is. When I was there, I was one of the first classes, so it was just sophomore and freshman when I started there. So it was still pretty small, which thankfully that's what I needed. But actually, I have 3 siblings, so I have 2 brothers and a sister. And my older brother and older sister both played soccer when I was growing up. And there's a decent age gap between the 3 of us. There's 6 years between me and my older brother and 4 between my older sister and I. And so since they played soccer and they were always kind of looking for an extra person, that was kind of my in with my siblings growing up. And my younger brother could care less about soccer, which he still to this day could care less, but he loved it when I played.
So that's how you got good, is by playing older siblings when you were little. Okay.
I'm convinced of it because it's your siblings. They don't take it easy on you. Like,
totally.
I could probably count the number of times I went inside crying, but I went back every time they asked. So we were all homeschooled for significant portions. We each kind of started at different places, and then we all went to high school. And we grew up in a Christian home. My mom was our spiritual leader. She was the one who took us to church. We prayed every night before bed. She just kind of was very adamant that was, that we knew who God was. Whether we chose to pursue that when we were adults or not was obviously our decisions. But yeah, she was pretty strong in that. And my dad wasn't so much. He would go with us every now and then. He encouraged us to listen to our mom, and by encouraged, it was like, you better listen to your mom.
Or else.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I would say now he has more of a relationship with the Lord, which I'm thankful for. But it was definitely my mom who kind of raised us to know and pursue our faith. So then at Valor, I played soccer there as well. I grew up playing club soccer. I played for a number of different club teams here in Colorado, but ended up playing the longest with Real Colorado Soccer, and I had a blast playing. I didn't think much of it. There was never really any pressure, which I was thankful for from my parents to, get a college scholarship or to pursue it long term. It was just something they let me enjoy. My mom probably learned a couple of rules, no kidding, like 2 years ago, like before I retired. She finally figured out like what offsides was. So, I mean, they just were so casual about it.
But I was going to ask you, so where did the love for soccer come in? Was it your older siblings were doing it, and so that's just what you did? Was it that you tried a bunch of other sports and you just loved soccer? Or were you guys a soccer family? It sounds like, your mom was just kind of up for whatever, not really pushing soccer.
No, she was up for whatever. I actually only played basketball in high school. I didn't play any other sports growing up. It was just soccer. And I think initially my love for it grew out of just being able to spend time with my siblings. I was just a little kid that wanted to play with her older brother and sister. So I think that's where initially the love for it started. But I think as I got older and just saw that I was getting better at it, it was just something that I thought I'd continue to pursue. And a lot of my coaches growing up too were really encouraging about, we see this in your future, or like, we want you to try this out on the field. And so I feel like I was always challenged with soccer as well, which gave me something to work on and pursue. So I think gradually it started to become something that I just enjoyed and loved doing, but it definitely just started because I wanted to hang out with my brother and sister.
Yeah. Well, do you remember a moment when it switched gears and you were like, no, I actually want to pursue this pretty hardcore?
Yeah, I think I started playing competitively at U11, and I was still pretty hesitant about that. I was never really confident in what I was doing, and so it was more or less my mom kind of like, we should just try it. And my older siblings, I think, played competitively as well, but they were never really, I guess, invested in it the way that I was for whatever reason. And so I'd probably say like U13 when I transitioned to play at Real, and I just really loved my coaches over there. And it wasn't even that our team was like that great or anything. It just kind of, I think then, in recognizing that, like, man, I could get a scholarship from this, and the league wasn't even around at that point. So, like, playing professionally wasn't even on my radar even then. But I was just like, all right, well, if I can continue playing this for a few more years, why not?
So, putting a pause on the soccer thing for a little bit, where were you faith-wise? It sounds like your mom was really the shepherd of the home in that way. And so in junior high, high school, what would you say your faith was during this time?
I would probably say it was pretty superficial in the sense of I knew all the right answers, and I knew that I needed to be in church, and a lot of it too for a long time was fear-based. I just had this idea of I really don't want to go to hell, and if that's what I have to do to not go there, then, I'll follow all the rules and I'll do the right things. I think there were probably glimpses, moments throughout those years where my faith was maybe a little bit stronger than it had been. I didn't want to stay the night at people's houses. I didn't want to once the sun was down, I wanted to be home because I was convinced that if the rapture came, I was going to be left behind. So I mean, I just there was a lot of fear, I think, in the faith that I had, but then I think there was a genuine component hidden in there somewhere.
You wouldn't be able to grab your mom's ankle on the way up or something?
Yeah, I was like, we're holding hands when he does this.
So when do you think that shifted for you and it became more real and deeper?
Yeah, it was in college, actually, and it really wasn't until my junior year. The first 2 years at Texas Tech, which is where I went, were pretty hard, and I wanted to transfer to the University of Denver because I wanted to be home, and it just kind of wasn't going. In case the rapture happened? Yeah, still. I was like, I'm going to be a few miles instead of a couple hundred. But yeah, so it was in my junior year of college. And that year just kind of was a crazy year to begin with. I had a really scary health complication happen that year, and just wasn't sure if I wanted to keep playing soccer, and the league had started that year. So I kind of felt the pressure of like I should, because everyone's telling me I should, but I'm not sure I want to. And so it was really that year I think I really had to, just press into the Lord in a way I didn't and hadn't been forced to before. And I think that's probably where I would say my relationship with him started.
That's so, that is one of the common threads with a lot of the women that we interview is, you have these plans and where you think your life is going. And especially when we're young, we have, all kinds of ideas of what we're going to do. And then, you lose a parent or a health concern, something like that comes in, and it shakes you and it makes you think more deeply about, especially if you grew up in a Christian home, like, is this stuff do I really believe this stuff? And, so it sounds like the health issue for you made you reflect on those kind of bigger questions of life.
Yeah. Because it tied in a lot with my career in general. So I actually got a blood clot in my left leg, and it was from the middle of my calf up until my groin. And so it had kind of been building for a long time. And by the time they caught it, they were genuinely shocked that it hadn't broken off and traveled to different places in my body. But so when I found that out, I was in Lubbock, where Texas Tech is, and my parents were in Denver, and it was like a whirlwind of the day. We found out that morning that I had this like extensive issue that they thought at first was like a sports hernia. It could have been like a really severe strained hamstring. So it was about a week that I was like in some pretty excruciating pain, and then we finally kind of did some MRIs and ultrasounds, and all of that came to the surface. So that afternoon I went into a surgery, and my parents flew in while I was in surgery, and I saw them afterwards, and first surgery did not go well. I was pretty much awake for the whole thing, which wasn't the plan, but just the meds weren't working, and my veins were so small at that point that they couldn't take anything out. So essentially when I came out of surgery, nothing had changed. And so the doctor came in, and my parents were there at that time, and he was just like, if we can't do anything by morning, we'll put a stent in your heart. And you can't play soccer anymore. You're going to be on blood thinners the rest of your life. And I was 17. I was like, what is happening? And so actually that night, my mom just stayed up praying. And I remember coming in and out of consciousness. I was on some pretty heavy painkillers. But every time I woke up, she was praying. And I was like, how is she still awake? What is she still praying about? You're just kind of like, your moms are strong. But I guess until you like really see them in action like that, you're like, this is nuts. And so I just remember at one point I was like, all right, I'm just gonna lift up a prayer, and Lord's will be done in it. But and I usually tell people, like, I didn't feel like I was making a deal with God, and I know he knows the like posture and state of our hearts when we pray, but I just remember praying like, Lord, if you do whatever you have to do, to not just like save me, like I don't want to have a stent in the rest of my life, but allow me to play soccer, I'll get this thing right kind of thing, like I'll really dive into all the questions that I still have and seek out, in different ways than I think that I had before. And so that next morning, we went into surgery again, and I was under this time, don't remember a thing, but I came out that second time, and the doctor came in with my parents, and he was just like, I don't believe in God. I wouldn't call this a miracle, but I don't know what other word to say for it. But like, your vein was completely open this time. We took everything out. You'll be on blood thinners for 3 months. And you'll be good to go with, with all the aspirations you had up until this point. And I didn't tell anyone I prayed. Like, I didn't tell my mom, and, I didn't share any of that. I just prayed this, what I thought was a casual prayer with the Lord. And I just remember thinking when he's sharing this news, like, holy crap, like, not only did he hear me, but, like, he actually did what I asked. And it was just, like, kind of that mind-blowing experience of, like, wow, he's actually there kind of feeling. It was really surreal. And so, yeah, that whole situation was kind of, like, I guess the turning point of, wow, like, all right, here we go.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then you were a junior that year, right? And then kind of walk us through, okay, so you finished college and do you go right into professionally playing?
Yeah, so I finished college a semester early. So I graduated in 2014, and the draft was that spring of 2015. And so I had finished up. I was still training with my team. And then I got drafted that spring and headed to New York like 2 months later.
So, you were professional for how long before you made it onto the U.S. soccer team?
A year.
Okay, year. So, Colson Center, who produces this podcast, has actually interviewed you before. Sarah's husband, John, has interviewed you before, because a number of years ago, there was a controversy with the jerseys, and I just wanted you to tell that story quickly, because as you were saying that prayer in that hospital bed about, God, I'm going to take my faith seriously, I just couldn't help but think about, oh, wow, fast forward a couple years, and you are on a very public stage. You are on the U.S. women's soccer team, the best defender, and you had to make a decision. And so would you mind just telling our listeners briefly about that story?
Yeah. So my first call up with the national team came a year after my first year in the league. So I got drafted in 2015. My first, what they call a call-up, so my first national team call-up was in October of 2016. I was with the team for about a year, and that was leading up into the Olympics. And I was the last man cut from that roster, which was like tragic. But so I was there with them for a year, and then they went through the Olympics. They had a couple of camps after that, and then in 2018, I was called up again for these, what they call international friendlies. So we were going to travel to Sweden and play 2 games overseas and come back. And each call-up, each camp is kind of like a tryout. So it was kind of like a restart for me. Like, okay, I get another shot at this thing. So it was in June of 2018 that I got that call-up. And a week before we were to leave for Sweden, I found out that the team was going to be wearing pride jerseys, which was essentially just rainbow-colored numbers on the jerseys that were just going to be in support of the LGBTQ community. And their whole intention behind it was that after wearing the jerseys, each jersey would be auctioned off, and the proceeds would go to different programs and charities for that community. And so just really briefly, I found out that we were wearing these jerseys a week before we were to go, and my mom was actually the one who told me. We saw it on Twitter, and they had decided, the Players Association had decided to wear the jerseys, which I wasn't a part of, so I wouldn't have known in advance about anything. And so I just remember calling my team chaplain at the time, my mom, and another woman that I considered a mentor at the time, and just asked if they would pray and fast with me for 3 days, because I didn't know what would be right, what would be wrong. I had a lot of external voices that, were good voices, but I think I just wanted a close group of people that I knew would pray and fast with me. So we did that for 3 days, and I just felt at the end of it that I wasn't supposed to wear the jersey, and that was really hard. But going back to what Aaron mentioned, one of the ways that I felt that I was making the right decision was thinking back about that experience in college, and just being reminded that I'd made this commitment to the Lord, that at whatever cost, whatever challenge was be put before me, I was going to choose Him. And so it was hard, but that was kind of the process leading up to it. And unfortunately, I didn't get to go to that camp, and it was about 2.5 years maybe later that I got another invitation, and but I haven't been called since.
So did you have any team members that were with you on that, or were you just out there on your own?
Yeah, I was kind of flying solo on that one. I had a really close friend, and she's still one of my best friends to this day. And she knew about it, and she actually was praying with me once I kind of opened up to her about what was going on. And we had some really interesting conversations about it. She's a believer as well, and I totally believe she has an incredible relationship with the Lord, and we saw it a little differently as well. And so that was even interesting to have someone like-minded in Christ kind of in that with me.
So she was, sorry, just for clarity, she was in it with you, but she saw it differently than you did?
Yeah, so she was like, I'm not sure if I would, like, I could see, wearing the jersey as a way of, like, showing your love for them, maybe not supporting them, but, like, so it just kind of going back and forth about if she was in that position, what she would do, and kind of voicing in that way.
So we recently talked to this gal named Rebecca McLaughlin, and we ended up, we weren't anticipating talking about this, but we ended up talking about the importance of friendship. And so I was wondering, I mean, it sounds like you had some really strong relationships. And tell us, like, I guess just speak to the importance of that in the position that you were in. How important were mentors and friends in that time?
Yeah, I would say it was extremely important. Just because you can feel so alone and isolated in those situations, and then you feel like, the weight of the world's on you because you have to make the decision, and it's your face that's going to be out there and your words that are going to be written. And so I think just having people that I knew I could go to, and not just friends, but I mean, like, godly friends that I really trusted were going to seek the Lord on my behalf, I thought was incredibly important. And maybe in the moment I probably downplayed it a little bit of like, well, I'll let these few people in and help me out. But looking back, like, if I had to walk through that alone, I think it would have been a completely different story, just because you can just feel isolated. And I know for me personally, like, I can be a people pleaser, and so I think if would have just been me in that arena, it could have been a different outcome for sure.
Yeah, and it sounds like those relationships helped to give you the courage maybe to do that, because I'm just thinking, yeah, the pressure is so intense, and this was a couple years ago, and I think the pressure has just gotten more intense, and controversies more and more with women's sports, and especially in the LGBT community of transgender, biological men playing sports with women. So this issue has just gotten bigger. It hasn't gotten smaller. But even a couple years ago, the pressure you must have felt to just go along. And I love how you had these people to reach out and pray for. Of course, your mom, who sounds like an amazing prayer warrior.
I want to meet your mom.
I know.
She's awesome.
I do too. But just how that community can give us courage to do the right thing in the moments that we are called to do the right thing. And we're all called to do the right thing in different times, but the pressure that you had on an international stage where media, everybody's watching to see, this decision was made for you. So you had the choice to go along or face consequences. So that part of just having that community to help give you courage, do you think that was, because you're just looking, you have to have people to support you. Otherwise, I could imagine you would feel so lonely.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, there's so many things that I think women in any career could find themselves isolated and lonely in making a decision about. And I think there's definitely courage that was, I guess, even imparted from a lot of these different women, in just a sense of none of them necessarily said, like, this is what I do, this is what I would do, or this is what you should do, but just more the support of whatever you do, however the Lord's leading you, we trust that the Lord's leading you. And I think that just gave me a lot of confidence in knowing that even within my own, like, circle of friends and community, there wasn't this, well, you better do it this way, or this is what the Lord is saying. It was just like, man, we'll pray with you, we'll fast with you, and however he leads you in that, we trust that he is leading you in that. So yeah, I just think in any decision that one has to make in life, when you can just have that, I guess, wise counsel that can help you in that, is super beneficial.
So were you still on the team for the North Carolina Courage at this time? Okay. So now, did that decision that you made not to wear the jersey affect your relationships on the Courage team, the North Carolina team?
Yeah, I would say yes and no. One of the things that I felt after making that decision was that certain players on my team who were walking in that lifestyle, that I wanted to intentionally reach out to and just explain my heart and why I was making the decision that I was. And I honestly think that was just the Lord's grace in allowing me the courage and confidence to do that, because I think that did maybe just bring a little bit more clarity and peace to that relationship. If I wouldn't have had those conversations, I think it could have been different. Not wanting to reach out to them could have been taken as, I don't know, like hurtful, and disingenuous. I don't know, so I would say they didn't change in the sense of, none of my teammates were like, oh, we should shun her, or like we need to talk to, our coach about this, or she shouldn't be on this team. I actually got a lot of responses of like, they were kind of confused why the national team would even do something like that, knowing that not everyone is on the same page on topics like that in life. That was, I think, just kind of one of the things that the Lord blessed me with the team that I was on, that there was just such support in the sense of like, we wouldn't have made that decision, but like, we respect you and we respect your faith, and you're on this team and that hasn't changed. And I don't know if it would have gone that way on any of the other teams. So I'm super grateful that's where the Lord had me when I had to walk through that.
That speaks a lot to the relationships you had already built. And the Colson Center talks a lot about truth and love go together. Like once you divorce them, they're kind of void. Truth is void without love, and love is void without truth. And I think that I love this example from your life, that you stood up to the idea that was wrong. And you said, that doesn't match my beliefs. But you invested in the relationships on a personal level that showed them that you're still for them, right? But this idea is wrong, and it's not helpful for them. And so I love that example, and I think that's something to really pause and think about, especially in this moment when there are a lot of bad ideas. And my husband often says, ideas have consequences and bad ideas have victims. And so it is the loving thing to do to speak the truth, because, anyway, so I think that's a really great example that I wanted to just hone in on to make sure everybody got that point, that there was the ideas and then there's the people.
We have a couple questions for you, Jaelene, about athletics in general, because you're our first professional athlete on the podcast, actually. So
cool.
We have some questions that I want to get your wisdom and insight on. And so, okay, one of them is just this idea of sports from a Christian worldview and how we as Christians should think about sports. I mean, of course, a lot of Christians are involved in sports, and we watch sports, and but I think just thinking from a Christian worldview about sports, and some people are probably like, what do you mean? What does that even mean? But I wonder if you could just offer your thoughts about that. How, as Christians, we should think about sports. Are sports just dumb entertainment, like whatever, or do they actually have value to the human life?
Yeah, I think sports in general are great, and obviously I played them and I love them, so I'll be the first to say that I think they're awesome. But I do think that even from an unbiblical standpoint, sports teaches, I think, kids so many things. And I know personally I learned a ton just about myself, communication, confidence, teamwork, all of that. And I think from a biblical standpoint, that only can help us in our walks with Christ. And I think when I thought about sports, eventually, finally, I think fully stepping into that relationship with Christ my junior year, I think my view on sports really shifted as well, in the sense of it wasn't just something that I was doing for fun or to kill time or to escape a bad, day or something. And those were all good reasons. But I think when I started to see sports as an intentional way to be a light and to share the gospel, I think it only made my love for sports that more deeper, just because it gave me opportunities to connect with people that I don't think sometimes get to be connected with outside of sports. I mean, an athlete's lifestyle, and just from my own experience, is crazy. And sometimes you can't find Christian community outside of sports. You just don't have time. You're either training or you're traveling or you're playing games. So I saw it as an avenue of, man, I get to share the gospel, I think, with a demographic that sometimes hit or miss in life. And then when I just thought of like all the analogies that Paul would give throughout scripture about sports, he was living in a context where people could so relate with that. Like, there were games there, and sometimes there was games, and other times it was just, Christians in an arena being persecuted, but the world around them saw that as sport and war and all these things. So I think when Paul's like referencing, running the race, finishing the race, going after a crown that doesn't tarnish, that's not going to go anywhere, I think is easily translatable to life today, with so many people watching sports and wanting to be a part of sports, of him just making that connection. Because I don't think that's even changed across history. Sports has been around forever. So if there's one thing that people, and I think a lot of media talks about it too, of like, some people love sports because they want to get away from all the politics, and some people love sports because they just, they were wired that way for whatever the reason is, that people just kind of always gravitate towards sports. And so I don't think it was by accident that, the Lord inspired Paul to write a lot of his comparisons in scripture to sports. And so, I think that's just why I, especially after committing my life to Christ in my junior year of college, it kind of just clicked in a different way of, wow, sports is really a gift. It's not just like this aimless, I'm going to do it because I can.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, watching you play, watching people play a sport, it really displays the beauty of the human body and what we can do and what we're able to accomplish. Like, you think about, watching the best of the best, or, people who have worked hard in something, and that's with all kinds of areas, right? And singing and dancing and in athletics too, but like watching Jesse Owens run, watching Michael Jordan, it's just like, it's God's design in a beautiful display of like, wow, the human body is capable of so much. And of course, we're all gifted differently, but it's beautiful to see the gifting and the hard work that people can do, which is what you did. And then to see it on display, I think, is one of the ways that, we can really worship God through our giftings and through this amazing human body that He's given us.
Yeah. It's
okay.
Crazy.
So, on off of that topic, do you think there's a special benefit for women? Because, women weren't always allowed to compete in sports. Learning teamwork, learning to put yourself, aside sometimes and, go for the team instead, or just some of the things you talked about. Obviously, discipline. But do you think in particular with women, there was something that you've seen the good of competing in athletics?
Yeah, I think so. I think for women especially, like even body image, I think for a female athlete, it can be hard to balance that sometimes. And I think I learned a lot about, like you said, just how incredible my body is and how the Lord's designed it and how I should see it, whether it looks like this teammates or it doesn't look like this teammates. So I think that was really important for me growing up. And I think that the team aspect for sure for women, because it's hard, I think, sometimes biblically to be like, I'm a strong, powerful woman, and I'm going to, you can go either way, like super, I think, feminist to the extreme, or the like super submissive of like, oh, I'm not going to speak up, I'm not going to say anything, And so I think sports even helped me in that arena of being confident in what I knew and saying what I needed to say, but not always feeling like I have to assert myself out here and I have to make sure everyone knows that I'm a woman who plays, professional soccer. And so I think there's a couple of things that I think are important to females in particular when it comes to sports. And I was actually just talking to my husband about it too, but we're expecting our first child in August.
Congratulations.
And
Congratulations.
Wow.
Thank you. And I was just telling him, like, I feel like that'll be like, I feel like soccer's even helped me in that regard of just like, I don't know. Like, I have no idea what to expect, but I'm like, I feel like soccer's been relatable to every other area of my life. Like, it has to play into a little bit of motherhood. So we'll see. But I don't know. Yeah, I just feel like for women in general, like sports can really teach you a lot just about yourself. But also, like you said, just the team dynamic of how do I lay aside my desires in this. And like, I wanted to be a forward my whole career, and my coach changed me to a defender at U13, and I was so mad. And then looking back on it, I'm like, there's no way I would have made it this far if like he didn't make that little tweak that I wasn't on board with. And I had to like just go with it because he was like, it's for the team. I was like, fine. It's for the team. Yeah.
It's a natural human tendency to struggle with putting our identity in what we do or how we perform. How has that played out? I mean, I imagine when you're a performer, like that is what people expect of you. Has that been a struggle?
Yeah.
And then retiring too. Like, has that been a hard transition?
Yeah. And I think personally, and I don't know if it's just a little bit of how the Lord's made me, I think that'll always be a struggle for me personally. And especially when you've done something so long. So, I mean, even not just as an athlete, I think when someone's career has been, or just number of their years have been involved in something, it's hard not to put your identity into that. And then, as you said, the whole performance, like, I'm supposed to go out and put on a show, and I have to earn my position, and if I'm not good enough, I'm not going to play. And so for a long time, that was a struggle. And I still struggled with it even as a professional athlete. There was a verse, though, in college that's become my life verse, if you will. But it's Colossians 3:23, and it says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord and not for man. And I think that brought a lot of, over the years, I think it brought a lot of freedom in the sense of what I'm doing out here is for the Lord. He's created me to do this. This isn't what I am, but this is something that He's allowed me to do, and it should be for His glory. And so I think that has always stuck with me, and there were some days where it was just like, even considering retirement, I was like, what else am I going to do? Like, I have no idea who I am outside of this. Like, I have a college degree, and I graduated from, and I've done all those things, but it is hard not to be like, well, the world has only seen me as a soccer player, so what else can I offer at this point? And so for sure, coming into this season of retirement has definitely had its ups and downs. And I think the first few months I was like, this is awesome. I'm not in the gym, I'm not in two-a-days. But yeah, over time it's been like, all right, Lord, like, I'll be patient in the waiting. But yeah, I think identity will always, there's just so many things out there that we can put our identity in, and what the world would have us put our identity in. And it could be career, it could be our sexuality, it could be all these things. And so I think that's just each day, for me personally, it's just been a reminder of I have to put my identity in Christ, or else I'm always going to be on this roller coaster of, well, I should be this because this is what I'm good at, or I don't know, just all those things that can kind of flood your mind on any given day.
Just you saying that makes me think, like, in those times in my life where I've been faced with, oh, I've actually put my identity in the wrong thing. You know, it's those times where your identity starts to get shaky, like probably what you've experienced in retirement a little bit, where you're like, whoa, okay, I guess I didn't realize I had put my identity in the wrong place. So as hard as it is, those are the most growing times. And I'm so appreciative for those shaky, insecure, self-conscious times where I'm like, oh God, I thought I had my identity in you, but obviously I did not. So anyway, we'll be praying for you in retirement and transitioning into being a new mom, because that's another time where your identity kind of goes a little wonky. But it sounds like you've already got the tools. You can already recognize when your identity is placed in the wrong place. And so that, you know, that's just even a little preparation for the next time that your identity is in the wrong place. And you can confess that and ask God for help.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Great reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate your honesty in that too. And I think, again, you probably face that more intensely than the rest of us feel because of just the platform that you had. But I think you're right that, you know, no matter what we end up, what our days are filled with, we can so easily find our identity in that, whether it's being a stay-at-home mom with a bunch of kids. And then so many times, you know, you hear stories of then the kids are gone and now the woman's like, now what do I do? Or now what do I live for? And it's like, well, if your identity was all wrapped up in being mom, and then your kids don't need you anymore, then you're going to have an identity crisis kind of thing. So yeah, this is something that we can all struggle with, and definitely, like you said, just being honest of like, yeah, this is something I'm going to struggle with for probably, you know, a lifetime. And that, I think, memorizing scripture, I love that, because just remembering who we're here for, what we're doing is really what grounds us, you know, in our identity. And so I think, yeah, memorizing scripture is good advice in that struggle of, you know, I'm just thinking about some of our listeners who we have girls in high school and college who are listening. We have women who are really retired. We're using the word retirement with you, but you're so young.
I got plenty of work ahead.
Yes, you do, because you have a baby coming. But you know, all kinds of women who are listening that just can relate to that, and just the good reminder of having those. This is why memorizing scripture is so good, and having those things in our minds and our hearts to remind us of truth when that truth feels like it's being shaken. Okay, thinking about our listeners, we love to always ask advice that you would give to, some of our younger listeners, Jaelene, some of our high school, even actually we have junior high listeners, so I should not exclude them too. So junior high school, one of them is my 13-year-old who listens to the podcast. But advice you would have just in general to girls who are listening and are growing up in this time and culture, what advice would you give?
I think for me personally, because sports were always a part of my life, I think I would just go back and tell myself, you know, to chase Jesus and not the platform. Because I think for me, for a long time, when I realized that like I was good at something, and I think it could apply to any female across the board, whatever you're gifted in, whether it's academics or something in the arts or sports, if just when you find something you're good at, you just continue to want to chase that. and it's a good thing, but it can so easily become like your God thing, and it shouldn't be. And so I think at a certain point I got super wrapped up in what I was doing instead of just trusting that, by following the Lord, He has already, ordained my steps, and there's a plan that He has for me and a purpose, and I don't have to figure it all out right away. And that often came in with not just my fear of Christianity and not wanting to, go to hell, but just the fear of life in general. Like, I just was a pretty fearful child growing up, and so I felt like I had to figure everything out. And so I guess, short answer for a long response is just to be more intentional with the Lord earlier on, of making that my priority. Because He used everything how it was supposed to be, and I've learned a lot along the way, but I think I could have had a lot more peace maybe, and clarity, and just the freedom from the fear if He would have been the first thing I went to instead of the last.
Do you think that's kind of what you learned on that hospital bed? I mean, I'm just thinking about you saying that of, you're saying chase Jesus. And so you were pursuing soccer in college and all these things. So it's not like you stopped doing that, but it was as if you made that shift of like, this is what, because we realize on the hospital bed or other things that ultimately we're not in control, right? That's what you learned. And so to just sit in, like, He's actually in control. So do things, for Him. And just hearing you say that made me think of, that was probably, one of those lessons you learned through that scary time. You struggled with fear, and then this big fearful thing happened, and God showed you can trust me, through that. So that's cool advice coming from you, and you admitting your fears and stuff. So thanks. That's really good advice.
So are you a reader, Jaelene?
I am. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What are you reading right now?
So I haven't started it yet. My husband recommended it to me because of our conversations about pretty much who am I now that I'm not playing soccer. And so it's called Anonymous, and I cannot think of the author's name right now. I can see the cover in my head. But it's a pretty short read, but it's just about really, like, we're all kind of anonymous. Like, this isn't our, like, the Lord's using us, but it's His story, and, like, we're pretty much just kind of, like, out here, and it kind of wraps up into the thing of, like, identity and who am I and what's the Lord's purpose for my life. And so that's the next one I'll be starting. I'm not currently reading anything right now. I just finished a semester of seminary, and I had so much to read, so I just was like, I'm not gonna.
Okay, briefly tell us a highlight from the semester at seminary.
Gosh, well, finishing with A's, that's, for me, that was like my highlight. Yeah. But yeah, I feel like this semester was pretty challenging just for a variety of different reasons. So it was kind of hard, just to get through. So I feel like my highlight was just finishing, honestly.
Okay, now I have all kinds of questions. Like, what led you to enter seminary?
So Matthew, my husband, when we first started dating, he was just getting started. And I had always, for whatever reason, wanted to do seminary when I finished school. I had first wanted to do Denver Seminary because there's one locally here. And so that was kind of like always like a back burner thought of like, well, when soccer's over, maybe I'll dive into that. But in North Carolina, there's a University Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, and so he was enrolled there, and I sat in on a couple of his classes while we were dating, and I was like, this is incredible.
That's awesome.
And
so can you do it all online?
Yeah, so my degree right now is fully online. I'm putting a pause on it for the rest of the year, as just gonna see how things go with baby, but
and sleep. Aaron and I would both say, during these next few months, just sleep as much as you can and don't feel any guilt. Just sleep, sleep, sleep.
I feel like that's like the number one response I've gotten from most. Like, they were like, before baby came, just sleep.
I know,
so
but
I actually have been.
And like, good.
I have, but I feel like it's because I'm just tired. Like, it's not like I'm like, oh, I need to like sleep. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like 7. I should go to bed. I'm tired.
Yes.
So
I would get so mad when people would say that when I was pregnant, though, especially towards the end, because, spoiler alert, Jaelene, you get bigger at the end. And you're so uncomfortable, and people would say, oh, just sleep and sleep. And I'm like, I cannot sleep. I feel like a beached whale, and I'm not comfortable. And so I always, whenever people tell me sleep, I'd like give them a dirty look, like quit saying that to me.
I know. Or when they're like, well, enjoy this time right now while it's in your belly and you're not having to lug the child around. I'm like, what? I mean, I don't even know what you're talking about. This is my first child. Like, all I want to do is see this baby. And they're like, well, enjoy this time. I'm like, I don't. I'm huge. And like Aaron said, a beach whale. Like, let's get this baby out.
Yeah, I'm experiencing both of those things right now. My husband just bought me like a full-blown body pillow, and it has changed my life.
Good man.
And but I'm also like, everyone's like, enjoy it because they're not here yet, and I'm like, I just want to see what she looks like.
Oh, it's a she.
Can I just get a picture of her face? Yeah, it's a girl.
I love it. I'm so happy for you guys.
I know. Okay, so last question, Jaelene, is if you could have coffee or tea with any woman in history, who would you choose?
Oh, there's just so many. I don't know. I feel like I would want to sit down with Esther, and probably just because of that whole situation with the national team, and it was so uncomparable to like what she had to go through. But you don't like hear a lot from her necessarily in her book, but like, like all that she had to like go through, and like you get like the side angle of her life. But I think I just want to be like, man, like what was it like? I don't know. I feel like that would probably be one person that I would really like to have coffee with.
We have just really enjoyed getting to know you and hearing your story. Thanks for spending this time with us.
Thank you for having me.